Okay, can I have your attention, please? We're going to have a few minutes for Gary to say hello and tell us a little bit about himself. Before we do that, this is Eric Christensen, Jerry, and Alfred. The three of us are hosting this little get-together today. And we have one purpose from now until November 6th, and that is to get Gary DeLong elected to Congress. My wife and I were fortunate back, I believe it was in March, to spend an hour in Gary's office and get to know him. After that, we committed to him to help him win this election. He did a phenomenal job in the primary. The two things I want to tell you about Gary and why we support him as opposed to his candidate, overriding reasons. One is Gary is a successful small businessman and understands at his core how to create jobs and how to turn the economy around. Nothing in this country do we need more than that. Gary is the exact kind of person we want in D.C., and not some intellectual who has no idea what to do with creating jobs. The second thing is, Gary has demonstrated, he's been a council person on the Democratic Long Beach City Council for a number of terms. He's the only Republican. And he's gotten more done on the city council than anybody else. He knows how to get along and get things done, negotiate, and get people to do what he wants. And that's exactly the kind of person we need to reach across the aisle and get both sides working together to actually turn this country around and work as a single United States to go in the right direction for a change. So with that, I'd like to turn the podium over. And by the way, Jerry was nice enough to help us get Los Alamitos folks here. We're going to be working together over the next 6 weeks with Alfred and with the two communities to get as much support for Gary as we possibly can. Gary, thank you.
I'm going to speak down here if that's okay. I don't think we need a microphone. Do we?
No.
And so I'll just raise it up a little bit. First, I want to thank very much Eric Christensen and Alfred and Jerry for pulling this together this evening. I do enjoy being able to get out in the community and talk to folks. A lot of you we already know, but there's some new faces as well, so thank you. I thought what I would do is just make some brief remarks. I really want to hear what's on your mind, so think about a question or a concern or an issue. Maybe you want to know what my position on that would be, or when I'm your elected representative, what would I do to fix that and move the ball forward? I'm happy to take any question that you might have. But before we do that, I thought I could tell you a little bit about myself, so everybody knows me. Talk a little bit about this district. This is a new district, right? It's been redistricting. And then tell you what my concerns and what kind of my core principles and what I think needs to be done, which I've been fortunate enough to be your elected representative. So first, I'll start with me. I'm 52 years old, married to my wife, Donna. We have 3 daughters from college to first grade. Sounded better a few months ago before the school. It was college to kindergarten. Then not quite the ring to it. We have 3 daughters. And I'll tell you, I'm concerned. I'm concerned about our oldest daughter that's going to graduate from college here in a year or so. And I think about what kind of a future is she graduating in. She's a business major, Marshall School of Business over at USC. And when I was younger and I graduated from college, there were a lot of opportunities. I had a job with AT&T a couple of months before I graduated. Before I graduated, right, I got to go and I got to start a job the next day. At the bottom, not at the top, not the middle, but at the very bottom of the organization. But there were opportunities, and if you worked hard, you could grow, you could rise in the organization. I did that. I worked for AT&T, Security Pacific Bank, and Carter Holly Hill stores for my first decade of my professional career. And then went off to run a small business for the last 25 years. And I think about my daughter Betsy. First of all, how long will it take her to find employment? Like I said, I was employed before I graduated. She won't be. Will it be 6 months, 12 months, a year? 18 months? How long will it take before she finds a job that's commensurate with her skills and her ability and her education? It's going to take a while. But she's a good kid. She's made good decisions. She'll do well. When I think about it, she finds this good job, and then what will her first decade look like? So for me, I did pretty well. Went to a couple of different companies, kind of rose the corporate ladder? Is she going to work for a company that's growing, expanding, opening new offices? I can tell you, when you look at our economy today, those businesses are extraordinarily few. It's not happening. So the number one issue for me is that we need to get our economy growing again. We'll talk about in a few minutes how to do that. But who benefits in a growing economy? We all do. That's right, we all do. If you're unemployed, you have an opportunity to get a job as the unemployment rate comes down. If you're underemployed, you have an opportunity to get a better job. If you're stuck mid-career because there's nowhere to go, well, if your company's growing, expanding, opening new offices, now there is somewhere for you to go. And if you're at the top of the food chain, you're the owner of that small business or an executive at a large company or a major shareholder, and the business grows and prospers, you're going to do well too. And I don't think that's bad. I know sometimes we have these discussions recently in our country, a little class warfare, taking this group and taking from that group. Well, what I'd like to have is I'd like to have a competitive, level playing field where everybody can do better, where everybody has an opportunity to improve. That's my vision of America, and I have a sense that that's your vision as well. That's the kind of country that we are. It's not one or the other. We want everybody to do well in our country. This is a very competitive race. It's the 47th Congressional District. That's the new name. It's 58% in Los Angeles County, Long Beach being 53%, the other 5% being Los Alamitos, Avalon, Catalina, and a piece of Lakewood. And then 42% is in Orange County. It's Rossmoor, Los Alamitos, Cypress, portions of Buena Park, Westminster, Stanton, and Garden Grove. It's a great district. To an extent, it's what redistricting was supposed to create as far as being a competitive district. I'm not sure about the two counties. That makes it a little more challenging. But you can do it. You just have to work harder. It's maybe not as easy as having just one large city or one large county. You're going to have to work harder. And I think for those of you in Orange County, hopefully one of the things that you've seen in my campaign is I've certainly worked harder than my opponent. Because I'm out there in Orange County all the time, going to a lot of different events, meeting a lot of community leaders, citizens. And I don't run across him very often. That's probably the number one complaint that I hear from people in Orange County is, where is this guy? How come he's not out here asking for our vote the way that you are? What I can promise you is when I'm successful, I will work just as hard for your vote in 2 years as I have this time around. And hopefully it'll be a little easier because I'll have a good track record I can point to. So what have you done for us, Gary? Well, these are the things that I've accomplished in the last 2 years. But it is a very competitive district. I'm a registered Republican, as Eric mentioned. But candidly, I'm getting a tremendous amount of support from declining states, independents, and Democrats as well as Republicans. And that's the kind of campaign that I'm running. Right? That I'm not running just to represent Republicans, although I am very fiscally conservative. And if you ask some questions, you'll learn about that tonight. And if not, my wife will tell you how fiscally conservative I am at home, frugal. And we definitely need that in our country today. What's our number one problem next to the economy and the lack of jobs? It's our fiscal situation. Right? A few weeks ago, the federal government crossed the threshold. We now have $16 trillion of debt. And I know it's a big number. It's a lot of zeros. Right? So what does it mean to us? Well, it means two things. First of all, it means $50,000 to every person in this room. That's your share of the national debt that Washington has created. That's an amazing number. And they created it. We didn't create it. They created it. So how big is 16 trillion? Well, to give you an example, in the last 2 years, they've created over $2 trillion of national debt. How big is that? That is more debt that was created in the first 200 years of our country, from President George Washington to President Ronald Reagan. That's more debt in 2 years than the first 200 years. It's horrific. It is going to bite us at some point in a very difficult way. And how do you create this debt? Well, about 50% of it's created by printing money. So the federal government just prints money to try and balance the budget. And that's bad. Well, what's worse is the other 50%, it's borrowing. And half that 50%, we borrow from China. I mean, who in this room thinks it's in our best national security interest to be tremendously in debt to a foreign country? That's crazy. That is just crazy for us to put ourselves in that position. So what do got to get to a balanced budget. It's over $1 trillion. It was $1.4 trillion deficit last year, and about a $4 trillion federal budget. Well, the first thing is you have to know is that federal government has doubled in cost in the last 10 years. It's increased 100%. Now, we also have to point out that that's 6 years under a Republican administration and 4 years under a Democrat administration. So you can't blame the other party. Now, we'll blame the other party for most of it. Of course, when your party is, then they'll blame them for most of it. But the fact is, it's both parties. Both parties created the mess that we are in today. And could you imagine in your personal lives, your business lives, if you doubled your expenses in the last 10 years and you didn't have any significant revenue growth along with it? I mean, who would still be in business? None of us. You can't do that. But that's what they've done at a federal level. So I believe the number one thing you have to do is you have to cut costs. And I think it's reasonable to cut costs. If you double expenses, but you can't cut 40%. I mean, that's what you'd have to cut. You'd have to cut 40%. Now think about that too. Could you imagine cutting 40% of your business expenses or hospital expenses? You're going to have some pretty negative consequences if you did that. But you do need to cut. You need to cut not only for financial reasons, but you need to cut to restore integrity and confidence with the American public. They say, look, we're doing what we can at the government level. We're cutting this, we're cutting that, we're optimizing, we're getting rid of waste, we're making things less bureaucratic. You got to show people that you're making those difficult, tough decisions to make government more cost-effective. And let me just clarify, I'm not anti-government, not at all. I'm one of those individuals who thinks that you should have as much government as you can afford. The problem today is we have way more government than we can afford. So we do need to do some cuts. But you can't cut all your way there, so you're going to have some revenue growth. Now again, from my fiscal perspective, I don't believe that new revenue growth equals new taxes. I know some people, that's the way to go, is just raise the rates. That's not me. I don't think that's the answer. Not only is it not an answer for a macro level, but it's certainly devastating to our economy. We're struggling now. The number one issue is economic growth. If you raise taxes, does that help the economy grow, or does it put another weight on the economy? Clearly, it puts another weight on the economy. So you can't raise taxes. You have to take that up for at least a period of time. So what do? You got to grow the economy. You have to grow the economy. And we talked earlier about growing the economy helps everybody. The person we didn't talk about, the thing we didn't talk about is that growing the economy helps the government. There's more revenue, there's more profits, there's more taxes. The government is going to take their piece. So it's corporate taxes, individual business taxes. It's going to help the federal government balance its budget. Be more money for state government, hopefully for schools, not just the Black Hole of Sacramento. And it generates more tax revenues for your local governments so that they can provide all the services that we need at the local level. So we need to grow the economy. There's a number of ways to do that. One of the things that I did as part of my campaign is in the primary, I visited 100 businesses in 100 days. And I learned a lot. I've been a small business owner for 25 years. But I learned a lot from meeting with other people in a lot of different industries. And the number one thing I heard was just how difficult it was to grow a business or start a business currently. Whether it be more difficult than ever to get a loan, whether it's more difficult for state regulations or federal regulations, but just the process of trying to start and grow a business is more difficult than it's ever been. We need to completely change that model. We need to get to a place where a business owner tells us, wow, it's easier. It's easier to start a new business because I was successful the last time I sold out. I want to start a new business. It was easier to do it this time than last time. And, you know, I had this really slow growth rate for the last 4 years before. We changed some things, and now it's much easier to open another office or another enterprise and get things going. That's what we need to get to in this country. We were kind of there for a while, a number of years ago. Most of the jobs were being created by small business startups and small business growth. And that's declined precipitously in the last 3 years. Small businesses are not growing at the rate they were. And we need to do some other things. We do need to take on healthcare. Now, regardless of where you are in the political spectrum and what you think about the Patient Affordability Act, the Affordable Care Act, what I'd like to think is there's 3 things that hopefully most of us, if not all of us, want in healthcare. I think we all want improved access. We would like everybody to have access to healthcare. It may not necessarily be free, but we want them to have access to healthcare. And part of that means we need to make healthcare more affordable. The second thing I think that we would all like is we would like to have more affordable health care. It's been expensive, it's gotten more expensive, and it's going to get even more expensive. The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office says that current legislation is going to add $1.8 trillion of cost to our health care delivery system over the next decade. If you add $1.8 trillion in cost, health care is going to be more expensive. You can't just absorb it. And I think the third and final thing that we want out of health care is we want to maintain or improve the quality of health care that we receive. And I think that can be done. I don't think, I'll be right up front, I don't think that repeal is the answer. Even if you hate the legislation, it's not going to happen. It's not going to be a big enough majority. The train left the station, it'd be too difficult. So it really is, at this point, how do you make it better? How do you make it more cost effective? How do you get to those three goals that we all want, but do it in the right way? Because we are not on that path today. The best you could argue is maybe you've increased access, and you could debate both sides of that. Maybe that. It's not more cost effective and more expensive. And as I talk to physicians and I talk to medical care centers, they're very concerned the quality of care is actually going to decline in the system if things don't change. And I think there's a number of things that we can do to change. Little things. I think you should be able to purchase health insurance across state lines and make it more competitive. So as consumers, we have more choices for when to purchase our health insurance. Let those insurance companies compete for our business. I do agree with the current legislation that you should not discriminate based on pre-existing conditions. Those conditions, those individuals, those patients need to be treated in our healthcare system. There's other things we can do. I think tort reform has to be part of the solution. You talk to doctors today about the sheer cost of operating that business, and one of the largest costs is insurance, because they're going to get sued. It's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when they need to be fully insured. So not only is this often several $100,000 annual cost with insurance, but then they'll tell you that they prescribe 25%, 30%, 40% more tests than they normally would. But they got to be bulletproof. They got to practice defensive medicine. So when that lawsuit comes, that 1 in a million, they don't want to lose, their business because they didn't prescribe that test. Somebody comes back and says, "Had you prescribed the test, you would have found that." So you cost that patient tremendously. It's now going to cost you millions of dollars. So a lot of those things, and there's many more, but those are the kinds of things that I think we need to fix in our healthcare system. It will result in improved quality of care. It will be more cost effective, and it will improve access. So those are a number of things on my mind, but rather than me continue, tell me what's on your mind. What questions can I answer for you? Yes, sir.
You mentioned about costs, and one of them happens to be Social Security. And would you favor and vote for private accounts for Social Security?
Probably. Let me give you a bigger answer than that. Social Security and Medicare are going to go bankrupt. They're going to implode around 2023 to 2025 if we don't do something. So let's see if we can't all agree, Democrats and Republicans, we can all agree that some change is required. If we don't change, it's going to explode. And I'll also tell you, the longer we delay making any changes, the bigger the snowball's going to get, the more difficult it's going to be. I do believe that we should leave intact the programs we have today that people are using them. From what I understand from the finances, it's reasonable to be able to say that if you're 55 or above and you're getting ready to take advantage, we could probably maintain the existing benefits and structure and method of delivery. But in under 55, we're going to have a significantly different plan. Should that be part of it? Perhaps. But I would tell you the best plan is the one where I've got my suggestions, you've got your suggestions, the Democrat, Republican, we put it all on the table and try and figure something out that works best for the American people. If that's part of the solution, that's terrific with me as long as we get the solution. If that's something that doesn't get majority support, I'm not going to die on that hill, but we do need to make change. We do need to do something, or they are going to be wrong. What else can I answer?
Well, I just think that we're in such debt, it's going to be hard to say pretty much any of all these programs. How do you feel about having some of the departments that haven't been proven effective, like the Department of Education, for one?
I think you have to look at everything. So, for example, one of the things we did in the city of Long Beach is our revenues declined over the last few years give us a 2 to 6% cut across the board. So now if you manage your organization well, or maybe you might be a higher priority, you'd only take a 2% cut. But if you had more bureaucracy, more fat, or maybe your mission wasn't as core as your mission was, you're going to take a 6% cut. I think you have to have everything on the table. Now, is the Department of Education fit into 2% with a 6% cut? I don't know. We'll have to look at it, but I think you have to have everything on the table. Because as soon as you start saying, well, I would cut everything, but I won't cut this, or I won't cut that, and you've got your favorites, and I've got mine, there's not going to be enough left for us to work together on. So everything needs to be out there. But I would tell you from an education perspective, while I do think it's reasonable for cuts, what I would be looking for is how to make the federal government more efficient in the Department of Education. How many people are there working in the Department of Education? What benefit do we have? As I mentioned, I have 3 kids, 3 daughters in school, Don and I do. What does government provide value, the federal government? They think about, well, what do we want? We want those dollars down in our kids' classroom. And what I perceive today happens is we send our tax dollars to Washington. Department of Education, in this case, takes their piece off the top, and at the state level, they take their piece off the top. By the time it gets to our kids or grandkids' classroom, there's not a lot left. So I would absolutely go back to those bureaucracies, because again, I don't see any benefit that my kids have received having significant federal dollars spent on education. And I don't hear from teachers here. When I talk to teachers or principals, really, never heard, go out and take this federal government regulation, this is really improving our schools.
The stories are not down, but they want to be extended, so just for the states that extend us a higher story. So,
State of California, right, we have one of the highest per pupil rates. We have one of the lowest performing education systems. And it didn't used to be that way in California. And higher education, which has done very well, recently has taken huge cuts. In fact, my opponent, who's the chairman of the State Senate Committee, has cut over 1/3 the Cal State University system budget in the last 2 years. Can you imagine? 30%. Equal cuts at the UC system, devastating cuts at community college, terrible K through 12. And the unfortunate part is, although we feel the cuts today, when we'll really see the results is 10 years from now. When we start graduating kids from our school systems that don't have quality education, then you have people that don't want to live in our cities, because our cities, many of them are known for outstanding school system. You don't have an outstanding school system. Why does somebody want to live in your city? If they don't want to live in the city, the price of your houses decline, your property tax declines, you don't have any services. I mean, it's a death spiral if you don't have a well-funded, outstanding school district. Many, many problems. And yet, that's what they're cutting. They didn't reduce pension benefits. They've increased the number of employees at the state level. Like I was in a debate with my opponent a couple of weeks ago, and he said he had created jobs. I was puzzled. I mean, I've been 35 years in the private sector, as a 25 years small businessman. He's been 20 years as a career politician. Before that, as a Cal State professor, which is not a bad profession, but those aren't job-creating things. And I finally figured it out. Since he's been in office in the state legislature, they have 60,000 more employees than they did when he got there. And that's the only jobs I can think of that he's created, is he has 60,000 more employees on the state payroll. I don't know about you, but I don't feel like I get much better from the service from the state of California today than I did 14 years ago. And certainly not 60,000 employees with 20% growth in workforce. I said, in my city, we've cut off 20%. We've done mostly through attrition, but we are 21% fewer employees today than we were 10 years ago. Now, but other cities have similar stories to tell, because we've all had to balance our budget at Sacramento School of Law. What else can I answer? Thank you. Any concerns? Any I've missed? Yes?
This question is related to the management structure of our country. And we have one of the lowest, I think, public ratings of our government at this moment. And it's been reported that Barack Obama has passed over 900 executive orders. We've had our constitutional rights trampled upon in so many different ways it's unimaginable, certainly in history. And yet we hear very little from the Congress, which is probably resulting in its low esteem by the public. We've got a Senate that hasn't passed a budget, has flat refused to pass any budget in 3 years. And the perception is a very difficult one for anybody entering Congress. How would you propose and express a change in the management style to where we have the two branches of Congress actually doing something and functioning on a full-time basis to solve the issues that are most important and get the confidence of the people back. Because right now we feel like a headless beast.
Well, let me, a few questions in there, but let me take the one about the budget, because, you know, Congress's responsibility, number one responsibility is appropriation. It's to fund the federal government. So the fact that the Senate hasn't passed a budget in 3 years means they failed their most important job. Now, I will give you some encouraging news. I was in Washington last week. One of the groups I met with is a group called No Labels. Some of you have heard of it, trying to get more popular. And what they're trying to drive is bipartisan solutions. They had a number of names up on their wall of Republicans, Democrats have agreed to kind of work with No Labels as they try and facilitate some solutions. And one of their core policy objectives is to pass an act called the No Budget, No Pay, which basically says, yeah, exactly, good for them. If you fail at your most important responsibility of your job, you're not going to get paid. Now, I think there'll be the devil in the details, right? Because we don't want a Sacramento solution that says we'll just pass this crappy legislation so we can get paid, and it's awful. So, you know, let's make sure we learn from that and do a good job so you really have to pass a reasonable budget. But I tell you, I'm very encouraged by it. It's a small group of members of Congress today, but I think it's up to 50, and it's been growing, and so I do feel optimistic on a couple of fronts. One is that we can actually get that done in 2013. There'll be enough members that actually want to pass that. But I also feel optimistic that they're equally balanced. That, you know, we're going to have Republicans and Democrats, because if this is a Republican agenda item, it's not going to get to the Senate if things don't change. And if it's a Democrat item, it's not going to get to the House if things don't change. So we really do need some kind of an outside facilitator nucleus of, I don't know, I want to call them moderate, but let's just say people that want to get something done for the country, not just political rhetoric. So I think that's the model I'm hopefully is how do you change things, is you get the folks that want to get things done, that don't look at compromise as a dirty word. Now, don't leave your principles at the door, stay true to your principles, but understand that getting half of what you want is much better than getting none of what you want. And Eric alluded earlier, and I'll tell you a little bit more about the story, but a year or so ago, I took it as a compliment. She didn't mean it as one, but one of my colleagues on the city council at the end of the evening kind of slammed the Bible down because she was very frustrated. She says, I just don't understand. You're the only Republican. There's 8 Democrats. The mayor's a Democrat. You always get what you want. Now the reality is, none of us always get what we want. Not in our personal lives, not in our professional lives. What she was alluding to, and she didn't understand, but what she was alluding to is the fact that, sure, I'm going to work with the person to my right, I'm going to work with the person to my left, I'm going to find out what the mayor's priorities are, and I'm going to see, you know, can I get enough traction here to get this thing passed with at least 5, if not more, of 9 votes. And candidly, it's something that I might feel very strongly about, but there's no votes, I'm not going to throw it on the council calendar just to throw it on. I'm going to work with people and try and get things done. Because that's where I ran for office. That's why I'm here, is to try and accomplish some things. I think we've been able to do that. But I'm willing to negotiate. I'm willing to negotiate. I'll come back with a second bite of the apple, you know, in a few months after we get the first one. You don't give up. But I think that's the skill set, and at least that's the mindset that we need today in 2012 going forward. We need people that are willing to move the country forward. Maybe it'll be in small increments. Maybe we won't get there as fast as we want. Maybe we won't go exactly where we want to go. But let's just see if we can turn this thing around and start moving in the right direction. Well, let me just say that successful campaigns are a team effort. We've done a good job raising money. Money is certainly important in the political campaign. We need to raise $200,000 more between now and November 6th. We're working hard at it every day. But at the end of the day, we're a great team. I couldn't be happier with the LA County and the Orange County strength that we have. But at the end of the day, we will win or lose based on our volunteers. Passionate people from the community that want things to be different, that have a preferred candidate, and are willing to get out there and talk to friends and neighbors. I know this Saturday we're going to have a precinct walk in Rossmoor. So if anybody hasn't signed up, we'd love to have you. Anything you can do to help the campaign, and everyone's different. So we don't try and put you into our mold. Some people love to make phone calls and don't want to knock on a door. Others do not want to get on the phone, but they don't mind spending an hour or two on a Saturday knocking on some of their neighbors' doors. And everybody's different. But if you'd like to make a change, and if I'm your candidate, if there's just something you could do for me, I would greatly appreciate your